People think the hardest part of gambling recovery is quitting, and don't get me wrong, quitting is insanely hard. The urges are hard to deal with, the withdrawals are difficult, the debt is insanely hard to not only deal with, but also accept that you have. And then also the conversations that you have to have with family, friends, coworkers, spouses are insanely hard as well. But looking back now, almost 2 years removed from my last bet, I don't think any of those things were actually the hardest part. I think the hardest part was figuring out who I was without gambling. Because when you're in the middle of it, gambling doesn't just become something you do, it becomes who you are as a person. Every day revolves around it. You're waking up and checking scores from the night before, you're checking the lines for today before your feet even hit the floor, and you're listening to gambling videos and podcasts in the car. You're looking at injury updates during work meetings, and you're watching games at dinner. You're checking scores and placing bets secretly in the bathroom. Hell, like there were times I'd be streaming games while I was taking a shower, literally. And the really sick part is none of that even felt weird anymore. It just felt totally normal. I knew more about Romanian basketball than I knew about my own hobbies. I could tell you who was playing in a random ITF tournament for tennis. I could tell you what was happening in Icelandic basketball. I could tell you why some random second division soccer match mattered. But if you would have asked me a simple question like, Joe, what do you actually enjoy doing? I don't know if I would have had an answer for you because gambling had consumed so much space in my life that there wasn't much room for anything else. And nobody really talks about what happens when you remove it. Everybody talks about quitting. Nobody talks about the Tuesday night, 3 months later, where you get home from work, you're stressed out because it's the middle of the week, you have bills due, life is just lifing, and there's no bets to be had. There's no lines or parlays, no game you desperately need to watch, and no app constantly demanding your attention. It's just you, and that's a weird feeling. Like, I remember sitting there thinking, now what? Seriously, like, what do normal people even do if they're not watching sports? Because I had spent years training my brain to believe that every moment needed action. Every game needed a bet. I couldn't watch games without a bet on it, even if I didn't care about the teams. Every sporting event needed some stakes, and every second needed stimulation. And suddenly, all of that was gone. The truth is, for a while, life kind of feels boring. And I think that's the part that scares a lot of people. They think if they stop gambling, they're going to be bored forever. I know I did. I genuinely believe that. I thought nothing would ever feel as exciting again. There wouldn't be any rush or anything that would hold my attention. But what I didn't understand at the time was that my brain was just recalibrating. I'd spent years flooding it with dopamine and didn't even know it. I had no clue what dopamine was, to be honest. I spent years turning every sporting event into what felt like a life or death situation. Years where I'm convincing myself that normal wasn't enough. And so when I stopped, normal felt incredibly quiet and it felt like it was kind of a bad thing. But quiet isn't bad. Quiet was just unfamiliar and uncomfortable. And that's where something interesting happened. I started having to get to know myself again. And I tell this to people all the time that recovery feels a lot like dating yourself. And I know that sounds ridiculous, but it's true. You truly have to figure out who you are again because for half your life, you were never betting. You were just liking sports as a fan or living your life. And what do you like? What are your interests? What do you enjoy when there's no money involved? What do you enjoy when there's no scoreboard involved? What do you enjoy when nobody's watching and everything is quiet? And the answer isn't something that magically appears overnight. You have to go find it. You have to try new things. You have to be willing to be bored and willing to suck at things. You have to be willing to do things that don't immediately provide a dopamine hit. Go for a walk, go to the gym, listen to a podcast, read something, take a class, go somewhere and do something, touch grass. And that's not because every single thing you do is going to become your new passion. Most of it probably won't, but eventually something starts clicking. You start collecting pieces of yourself again. And that's what happened to me this past weekend, actually. I took my daughter to her skating recital, and mind you, she just started skating and it was awesome. But let's be honest, she's not going to be in the Olympics next week. She's not going to earn any scholarships out of this at 3 years old. And I figured we'd maybe be there for like an hour. Turns out this thing was 2.5 hours and she was probably on the ice for like 3 minutes total. Old me would have hated that. Let's rephrase that. I wouldn't have hated it, but I would have definitely been disinterested on the times that she was not on the ice. Old me would have been checking scores every 30 seconds, looking for bets, following games, checking what was going on in the sports world, wondering when this thing was going to end so that I could actually watch the game. physically sitting in the building, but mentally somewhere else. But again, something weird happened. I enjoyed the entire thing. Like, don't get me wrong, 2.5 hours was a long time to sit through that. But it wasn't just that I enjoyed it when my daughter was skating, I enjoyed it when she wasn't. I found myself watching these kids work their asses off and watching them get nervous before their routines, seeing them fall down and pop up immediately and just keep going through it. And it was so cool to see because there wasn't anything that was going to stop them. Like, they didn't hold their heads down or throw a tantrum or anything. You just watch them make mistakes and continue anyways. And I remember sitting there thinking how admirable that was. Like, these kids weren't perfect. They're not professionals. They weren't winning anything. They were just putting on a show for their family and friends. They were just out there being kids. And there was something really cool about that. And it hit me. A few years ago, I would have missed every bit of it. Not because I wasn't there, and I don't get me wrong, I definitely wouldn't have missed my daughters, but because I wasn't truly present. That's what gambling stole from me more than anything. Not just the money, I can make money back. It wasn't the debt, yeah, I'll pay that off over time, hopefully. But it took my attention and presence and curiosity and the ability to appreciate ordinary moments. And recovery gave those things back to me. Today, some of my favorite moments are moments that would have sounded unbelievably boring to gambling Joe. Going for a walk, getting in the gym, sitting outside by a fire, watching a baseball game because I actually enjoy baseball, not because I needed a team to cover the run line or get me to the over. Not because I needed a meaningless run in the ninth inning, but because I genuinely enjoy the game. And maybe that's the biggest thing I've learned through all of this. Recovery didn't make life more exciting, it just made me present enough to realize that life is already interesting enough. If you're early in recovery and life feels boring right now, I understand. I truly do. But give yourself some grace and some time. You're not just quitting gambling, you're literally rebuilding and rediscovering yourself. And you're figuring out who you are underneath all the noise. And that takes time. The good news is you're human. Humans adapt, humans learn, and humans grow. One day you'll look up and realize you're enjoying something that would have sounded completely ridiculous a few years earlier, and you'll realize the life you thought gambling was giving you was actually waiting for you the whole time.